Levy is in Newquay in Cornwall. Levy, what would you like to say?
So it's very nice to speak with you.
Likewise.
I used to follow some of the beliefs that Alex Jones espouses when I was a very young man.
Yeah.
I was raised in the American Southeast where they preach tyrannical government is coming to get you. They want to take your guns. They want to take your rights.
Okay.
So Alex Jones in the early to mid 2000s when I was in university was one of those people who took the stance of the government's coming for your guns.
Yeah.
As I progressed through university and actually learned about the world around me, your eyes start to open to just how bonkers this person can be. So what he does is he preys on what we would call already vulnerable people.
Yeah.
The poor, the uneducated, people who are already a little weary of the government itself anyway.
Mm.
And so, he grabs them by playing on the fears and the emotions, and things that otherwise would be able to be worked out logically become an emotional response of someone could not possibly have walked into a school and murdered 26 children. So this must be a way for the government to take these things away from us.
Oh, I see. So it's wrong end of the telescope time, isn't it? It's you start with the belief that you are under threat, that they want your guns and they'll do anything to get them. Once you believe they'll do anything to take your guns away, then the door is open for something as outwardly bonkers as staging a school hoax.
Yes, and it happened
massacre.
with COVID as well, where they will do anything to get Donald Trump out of office. So COVID is now a massive conspiracy to steal an election.
Okay, because it worked.
And the reason that people like Trump and Farage will get into bed with a man like Alex Jones, and it's also why no one stands up to him, is the network of people who follow him online is so vast.
Is it?
That they can take a conspiracy such as what the previous caller said of COVID comes from snake venom and essentially turn it into a fact. What is it? Kellyanne Conway called it an alternative fact in 24 hours. And it's all over right-wing news. And the reason no one stands up to someone like Jones is because that same network will dox, harass, and even show up at the homes of people who question it. And the Sandy Hook parents have finally become the only ones who have been willing to or strong enough to actually stand up to the online harassment and finally get Alex Jones in court and expose him for the fraud that he is.
Because, in a sense, they'd already lost the most precious thing they could lose. So the leverage of his supporters is diminished. If you've lost your baby, if you've lost your child, you're going to be less. And I know many people had to move house. They had to change their names. There's some astonishing stories of the measures that these families have had to take to avoid Alex Jones's followers. But there has got to be something, I think, in the idea that if you've lost your child, you are more equipped to take up this fight than somebody who hasn't. Am I making sense? I don't want to sound simplistic, but I'm just thinking about what would I do in those, because in those situations, the first thing you think of is your children. And if when you boil it down, go on.
When you boil it down to its basest form, they have literally lost everything they could possibly lose. So what more can these insane people on the internet possibly take from them? The people who lost loved ones in Aurora, Colorado to James Holmes with the Batman shooting.
Yeah.
The families in Buffalo, the families in Charleston, South Carolina, this online presence will harass, release your information, show up at your home, and they bully you into being quiet. And it's gotten to a point now where the Sandy Hook families from Uvalde, Texas, who lost their children in recent months, have finally realized there are more of us now who back them than are willing to stand by and watch them be harassed. The Alex Jones generation, the Trump generation, the Republican base here is slowly but surely, and it sounds terrible, but it's slowly but surely dying out. And every generation in the U.S. is more progressive than the previous.
And that terrifies them too. That terrifies them too.
It does.
That's why woke has been invented. That's why woke has become a thing to rail against and to fear and to fight.
You have the Parkland survivors from Florida holding rallies, being thrown out of congressional hearings for trying to make the point of, we survived the death of 19 of our classmates. Please do something. And now that the younger generations are willing to take that stand, some of these families have realized, hey, we're not doing this alone anymore. So maybe we can show him for what he is. And so Trump and Farage will latch on to that, to his insanity, because there are still people that are willing to pump it out online, unadulterated.
And they pay their wages in a sense. They get their support and their validity, and in some ways their income from the same base, from the same supporters. I got two more questions. So I'm so glad you were listening today. You can probably guess what one of my questions is, which is what I mean. You mentioned university, and I understand the role that critical thinking would play in a process like this. But what broke the spell for you, Levy? What sort of, and how did you feel when it broke?
I grew up in a very rural town in the state of Alabama, 1,800 people, very insulated. My father was a teenager in the American South in the 50s and 60s, who, God bless him, kind of broke some of his bigoted views as I grew up. But when I got to an area of where I went to school with 200,000 people in the city, the university has 40,000 on campus, just being exposed to other people, other beliefs, and other ideas kind of opened it up for me.
So because your beliefs became unsustainable, essentially. You couldn't cling to these beliefs when there was so much evidence contradicting them in front of you every day.
Absolutely. Being away from the echo chamber kind of broke the spell of, this is what we believe, this is what we've always believed, and this is what we know to be true. Because eventually you get out in the world and realize none of this is actually true.
That's the incredible thing that's the incredible thing from the outside. None of it is actually true. The problem is perhaps, and this is why your age might be relevant, and I hope your optimism isn't misplaced, but social media now has allowed these people to create a false ecosystem, hasn't it? A self-sustaining ecosystem where they support each other's delusions and they support each other's lies.
It has, but what's happening, especially in the States, is now they're being relegated to having to create their own social media platforms.
Yeah.
Parler, Truth Social, the one that the Crazy Pillow guy created. They've had to create their own because now I'm 37, so I'm on that borderline of Gen X and millennial. So I'm a centrist in the States. I own a couple of handguns. Do I need them? No, I would willingly give them up if that's what they wanted. But I'm also very socially progressive. Marry who you want, your body, your choice. As long as you're not inconveniencing anyone, do what you need to do. Live your life. We've gotten now to where people of my age group, the younger generations, have told these people the things you are saying and doing online is unacceptable. You have become a hazard to public health. You have become a hazard to the mental health and well-being of younger kids.
Yeah.
The bootlicking, essentially, of American police forces and believing that they can do no wrong is a health hazard to minorities in our country. And we have told them, look, this is unacceptable. We will not take this from you anymore. You've inflicted this on us for most of our life. You've made the world we live in almost unsustainable. So we're going to do what we can do to fix it and change it. If you want to create your own space, that's fine. But in the public space with the rest of the world, we're not going to let you do this and occupy this space anymore.
Because ultimately, reality has to matter and objective truth has to forgive the pun, has to trump lies. Ultimately, it does, and it's surprising to me how long it takes sometimes to get there. Levy, you're going to be one of my favourite callers of all time, I think, because not only have you really got my no, but you've brought something to the table I hadn't seen before, a better understanding of all the links, all the almost the sort of momentum that gets built up and where it leads. So I owe you one. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, and I hope we talk again. Wow, it's 11:46.